Mandi, thank you so much for being here. We'll get to the movie in a moment, but you named a film company after Hannah More. Interesting and unusual thing to do. Tell us more about that.
And hopefully it's not going to be insulting to anyone's intelligence to give a little bit of context. So Hannah More was a contemporary and colleague of William Wilberforce a couple of centuries ago here in this lovely country. She was what we call the culture engagement strategist for the Clapham sect. So where Wilberforce was advocating in Parliament for various legislative changes, she was writing poetry and producing plays and writing penny tracts for culture change. And they had a two-pronged strategy. Some of the content that she produced was for an elite audience, more the nobility, and some was for the masses. And so we take a lot of our cues from that same paradigm. Some of our projects have a focus for a more niche audience, some for a more mass audience, but all in purpose of engaging and transforming the culture.
Hannah More obviously had a number of causes that she was passionate about, poverty, abolition, education. What are some of the causes that you're passionate about? What are the stories you want to tell? Or perhaps put differently, who are the Wilberforces that you want to serve?
I would say the dominant theme in our content is the good of religion, the good of Christian faith. That is certainly a contested statement in our American culture, and I think increasingly in just the Western culture, broadly speaking, that Christianity is actually good for the world and it is good for individuals. Some of our content is a little more focused on the individual audience member impact and how their own souls will be shaped by the story, and some of it is a little more societal. We actually have found ourselves drawn in the last few years to a couple of projects that are specifically focused on political polarization. It was wonderful to hear from Tim Dixon earlier from More in Common, because a few of our projects are really focused on showing how relationships across political difference in particular is possible and it's good for both the individual as well as for the society.
How do you go about deciding what particular stories to tell?
Sometimes projects come our way and we go through a discernment process to determine whether we'll be involved. And it's kind of a three-tier process where we first assess just whether it's aligned with our brand and our own mission, and then whether there's a role that we could constructively play. And if so, do we have the capacity? Because I am the only employee, the only full-time worker of the company, so sometimes we just have to say no because there's only me. And other times we come up with an idea internally. The 21 was actually an idea that my business partner, Mark Rogers, had when he came back from a trip to Egypt in 2019, and we began to talk about what would it look like to tell the 21's story in their own visual language. So it looks different depending on the project.
I'd love to hear you speak more broadly in terms of what have you learned about how to go about renewing culture through the creative industries, the opportunities and challenges that you find there?
Two things that strike me immediately. Number one is the importance of prayer. We cover all of our projects in prayer regularly, and I'm very blessed to have colleagues that have committed to praying with me and for me on a regular basis for our projects, because I don't think it's a stretch to say that committing to a co-production is sort of like committing to a marriage. I mean, you don't know how long the project is going to last and everything that it's going to entail. And so that's a big commitment to agree to co-create something with someone. So we need a lot of discernment in that regard. And then I would also say avoiding a scarcity mindset. And this is something I have to hold myself accountable to regularly. Resources can appear to be constrained for any creative project. We always have to have some amount of resource to actually fund it. And it can be easy within the industry to slip into the mindset of a fixed pie, that there's only so much money to go around, and if I don't get it, somebody else is going to get it, or somebody else gets it, then that means I can't. And I have to be reminded regularly that God is infinite in resource and creativity. If He wants me to do a project, if He wants us to be involved in something, He'll provide those resources, He'll provide the relationships, and when the door is closed, that just means it's not for us, or it's not for us at this time. And it's such a blessing to be able to connect others and see them co-produce, co-create. We may not be involved, but we get the blessing and encouragement of being able to watch.
I once heard someone say part of our job as followers of Jesus is to learn to tell a better story than the prevailing culture. I like that, but how do we go about doing that? How would you speak to that?
Well, number one, we have to know what story we're telling. So I think it's critical that we ourselves understand the fullness of the gospel narrative, Genesis to Revelation, the whole way through, and to be steeped in that. And in a lot of ways, to trust that as we are faithful to the paradigm that God has given us, the example that God has given us in the gospel, as we faithfully tell similar stories, then He'll do the work in a lot of ways. It's honestly a big relief to know that success is not dependent upon me, nor does the world get to define that for me or for any of you. God gets to define success. We leave the fruit and the results up to Him. And it's not always easy to not get to see those results real time, but I think sometimes that's God's grace and kindness to me in particular, to not be tempted to have an inflated ego.
Tell us more about the film we're about to see.
So, as you mentioned, it tells the story of the 21 Coptic men who were martyred by ISIS in Libya in 2015. And we've produced it in collaboration with the Coptic community and with a global team of 70 artists from 24 different countries and multi-faith background as well. It was really incredible throughout the 5.5 years that it took to produce this, to have artists reach out to us because they had seen posting online about the film or they knew someone who was involved, and to ask, how can I contribute? And a lot of our artists worked for free, they worked for a reduced rate, they squeezed this project in nights and weekends to make it happen. And at this point, we released the film in February, and it's reached almost 2 million viewers worldwide at this point.
The reaction to the film has been amazing. I mean, it was shortlisted for an Oscar, which is extraordinary. Tell us both about the reaction, but also what are you hoping to come from this particular story?
So the Oscar shortlisting was a total God thing. We don't get any credit for that. We always aspired to produce the film at a level of quality that it would be competitive for an Oscar, but we had never done the campaign process before. And normally, you would take a film to film festivals, you would win awards, you would begin to build hype, and then you would go for the Oscar. But in God's providence, we didn't finish the film until August of last year. So we literally had 1 week in which to make the film eligible by putting it in a theater in San Francisco for 7 consecutive days, and we get a little certificate from the theater saying, you are now eligible. So we submitted the film to the Academy at that point and tried to campaign for the shortlist, but didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't have anyone professional heading that up. And God just got the film to the right people in the right timing, and when the vote came out, the original list of 90 films was cut down to 15, and the 21 was one of those 15. So it's been really incredible to see the industry validate the artistic merit and the power of the story in that way. It's an industry that is not usually kind to explicitly Christian content, but in this case, to have that industry validation. And it's been beautiful to have such an incredible response from the global church. I literally get emails every week from people far-flung places talking about how it's impacted them, how it's inspired them to rededicate to their faith, and asking if they could translate it into their own language. So at this point, we have subtitles in over 20 languages available.
Well, we can't wait to see it. And I recognize that what we're about to see is the fruit of many years of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. And we just want to say a huge thank you to you and the team for all that you have poured into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mandi Hart.